Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Diploma in Photography. A very quick sound check before we go any further, just to make sure that everybody can hear me there loud and clear. So please just type in yes or type in Y into your chat box if you can all hear me there loud and clear. Okay, so just waiting for some yeses. There we go. Becky, Nicole, Lucky, great name, Lucky there. Adrian, fantastic. Lots and lots of yeses. Pedro, Katie, fantastic. Loads of yeses, loads and loads of students here with us this evening. Welcome to all of you, and welcome to your first lesson in Diploma in Photography. Okay, so just wanted to welcome everybody and thank you for choosing to study here with us with Shaw Academy. I hope everybody's looking forward to getting started on this exciting course. Are we all excited about learning about photography? Excellent, excellent. Lots of yeses coming in there. Brilliant. Well, my name is William Eames, so we're going to have to just get through a little bit of housekeeping just before we get into the content of this evening's lesson. Okay, so you are here with myself, William Eames, and we've got the team here on support to help you out as well. We've lots of students attending today's webinar, and we promise to prioritize questions from our Premium Plus members, but we do have a support team here as well that will endeavour to answer all of your questions as quickly as possible. Hi Ra, I can see you're asking how do you chat with the teacher. You're typing into the correct place, so you just type into your chat box there and I'll be able to see all your questions coming in. Now, any questions that I don't get a chance to answer, our team here will be able to grab those for you as well. Now, on screen, you can see the different membership options available for you. The majority of you here are on Premium Plus members. I know loads of you, have done courses here with us previously in the past. But for those of you on a 30-day trial, it's just important to note that your 30-day trial now starts from today and all lessons are included. Okay. We also, if you want toolkits and diplomas, they will cost $39.95 each, or alternatively you can upgrade to our Premium Plus membership and then they are included, and that is by far our popular choice. Now, so those of you who are on your 30-day trial, I hope you're all excited to sample one of Shaw Academy's great courses. Now, I can see a couple of people asking, I can see Caroline, you're saying thanks so much, but why do we offer trials? Okay, well, you saw the full price of our course on Shaw Academy website. Well, great question, Caroline, and I'm sure most of you are wondering the same thing. Well, as most of our students generally want to take our advanced courses, we'd like to give you the opportunity to sample what we have to offer before you decide to join us as a Premium Plus member. That way you know exactly what to expect with Shaw Academy, rather than joining without experiencing the quality of our courses. Our students claim that our courses have changed their lives. We want to give everybody this amazing opportunity to see the power of education when it comes to transforming lives. We all know that education can change your life, and we expect you will become a full paying member like the vast majority of this evening's attendees. Now, so just a little bit of housekeeping just before we get into our lesson. So students often ask me if we require to buy any, or if you need to buy any books or anything like that to help their learning on this course. And the answer is no. We do provide full toolkits to support your learning experience. And toolkits include starter packs, which are already jam-packed with incredibly useful information, webinar slides for every lesson as well, because let's face it, you can't write everything down. So, if you have your notebooks out, don't worry, you will be able to get a copy of the slides as well. You'll also get summary notes as well, which basically condenses the lesson in all the main points and a great helping hand when it comes to reviewing the lessons for your final assignment. And finally, you're going to get 2 bonus videos in that toolkit as well, created by myself, all about camera equipment. So you'll find in your toolkit that will be available for you tomorrow that you'll have these 2 extra bonus videos as well that will have all everything to do with different cameras, different accessories and so on, because we get loads and loads of questions about different cameras and that. So the toolkit will be very, very useful for you. Okay, so you'll get the lessons, or sorry, you'll get the toolkits for the first 4 lessons. But if you are a Premium Plus member, you will have access to all the toolkits as well. Just on that point as well, now already I can think, I see lots of students saying, I don't know if I'm going to be able to attend all the lessons live, and we can appreciate that. We can appreciate that life is very, very busy. It can be difficult to attend these lessons live. So let me make this even more tempting for you. During lesson 4, I will be announcing the winner of a very exciting competition. One of you lucky students will get your hands on a 12-month Premium Plus membership to Shaw Academy for absolutely free. So how exciting is that, guys? So it's a competition for you live on lesson 4. One of you is going to win a 12-month Premium Plus membership. So, how do you win? Well, all you have to do is be live on lesson 4 to be in with a chance of winning, as our winner will be drawn from all the live attendees. And if you attend lesson 2, you're going to double your chance of winning, as we'll put your name into a draw for the second time as well. So you can actually double your chances as well if you attend lesson 2. Okay, so I see lots and lots of people saying wow and brilliant, that's fantastic. Yeah, it's a great prize. It'll give you access to everything that we do here in Shaw Academy, including my ultimate photography program, and we'll speak about that a little bit more. Okay, so I just also want to say as well a big welcome to our employees from Google, from Microsoft, from Twitter, from Just Digital and so on, who are here with us this evening as well to learn new skills. We have trained students from all of these companies and many more, and we are really delighted to welcome all of our enterprise customers here tonight, and we thank you and your employers for helping us to help you. Okay, so now, with all of that out of the way, let's have a look at what we're actually going to be covering throughout this course. Okay, so we have 10 lessons altogether. So we're divided up into 10 lessons altogether. Okay, I can see a couple of people asking, is the sound is gone. Can everybody still hear me there loud and clear? Excellent. Okay, lots and yeses still coming in there. Fantastic. Okay, so let's have a look at what we are going to be covering, this evening and throughout the next 10 lessons. So tonight we're going to take it easy and we're going to have a very basic introduction into what photography is, and we're going to have a look at breaking down some of your different types of cameras as well. So the purpose of this evening's lesson is to get you familiar with how online education works, but it's also to get you inspired as well. I think one of the biggest parts, or one of the hardest parts for photographers, is actually, thinking about what they want to photograph. Okay, so we're going to have a look at some different styles of photography this evening that will hopefully inspire you to get out there and photograph, and we'll also have a look at the different types of cameras as well and explore their advantages and disadvantages a little bit later on as well. Then in the second lesson, we're going to get a little bit more technical. We're going to have a look at demystifying cameras functions. So we'll actually begin to break down the different buttons on our cameras. We'll also have a look at different lens types as well. So, just as important as our cameras are our lenses. So we're going to have a look at different lenses in lesson 2. Okay, then in lesson 3, just be aware of this. This will be an on-demand lesson that will be available for you on Friday. So this lesson won't be live. Okay, so this will be available in your student login area. You can access it in your own time from Friday as well. Okay, and that will be with our other educator, Thomas Woods. Okay, so does everybody understand what I mean by on-demand, by pre-recorded? So it'll be in your login area on Friday. Excellent. Brilliant stuff. And then we're back then next week in week 2 for lesson 4, which is all about motion and depth. This is going to be delving into our camera's shutter speeds and our camera's apertures. So we're going to have a look at how we can control motion using shutter speed and how we can control depth of field using our camera's apertures as well. And remember, we'll have our winner of our 12-month Premium Plus membership in that lesson as well. So very, very important and exciting lesson. Then we'll have a look at competition composition. So we're going to move away from the technical aspect a little bit, and we'll have a look at how we can actually see as photographers, how we can just improve what we see with our photography, and how we can compose our photographs better as well. And we'll take that a step further with another on-demand lesson that'll be available for you from next Friday. That's an advanced composition lesson, so it continues on from where we leave off from lesson 5, just giving you some more things to be aware of when you're composing your photographs. Then we're going to move into week 3, and this is where we're going to have a look at how we can control our exposure in our cameras. We're going to have a look at how much light is enough, and this is going to cover everything to do with our light meter and stops of light. And then a really important lesson, lesson 8, our fully manual mode. How many of you are here to learn how to use your cameras fully manually? I can see so many people saying me, 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 me. Adrian, you're saying count me in. That's fantastic, Sean. Yes, brilliant. Well, this is, I think, what the majority of students are here to learn, is how to use our cameras fully manually. Okay, so a very important lesson. We'll bring our shutter speeds, our apertures, and our ISOs all together in lesson 8. And then we're going to round things off in week 4. We'll have a look at the color of light, which is going to be having a look at the white balance in our cameras. We'll also have a look at focusing as well, how we can improve the focusing within our photography. And then finally, after we've done all of those 9 lessons, we'll round it off with a look at the digital image. So the digital image is all about our raw files, our JPEGs, our resolution, and so on. And it'll be a good stepping stone then for you to move on to more advanced things as well. Okay, so is everybody excited about those 10 lessons, about that outline? Excellent, fantastic. Great stuff, great stuff. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's not waste any more time. So each one of you has taken the first step towards achieving your objectives by showing up here this evening, and you are taking control, and you are now on the path to success. Now, how you can achieve your success is very simple. Just keep attending the lessons, keep showing up to the live lessons. Attending live is fun, it is interactive and engaging. Our live attendees have a far higher completion rate than those who will only do the recordings. So when you can, do attend live. Now, we do understand that's not always going to be absolutely possible, but when you can, please do try to attend live. Now, so let's get right into it, and this evening we are going to be having a look at photography styles, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, and we're also going to have a look at different camera types as well. So we'll probably show your camera a little bit later on in the lesson too. Now, and then we'll have our summary, we'll have our course interaction, and we will do a Q&A at the end of the session as well. Of course, I can see lots and lots and lots of questions coming in there, like from Harold. I can see a question coming in there from you, but we will answer all of these questions at the very end of the lesson as well. Okay, so why do we want to develop our knowledge in photography? Well, it's very, very simple. Without skills and knowledge, we'll always be stuck on automatic mode, and our progression as photographers will simply cease. You'll never gain the abilities to make strong and consistent images every time you shoot, and you'll never know what results the camera is going to produce and why it's giving you these results, okay? The camera is only a tool, guys, and like any tool or like any craft and skill, we need to begin to master the tool before we can really master the craft. Having control over the camera will help you to fulfill your creative vision. So we all pick up the camera because we all want to show people how we see the world. We want to be able to achieve that and our creative vision, and the only way we can do that is with skills and with knowledge. So we're going to have a look at some different styles of photography that you might be interested to try, and then later on, as I said, we'll have a look at some of the basic features that you should understand on your cameras as well. This is an introduction to photography, so this lesson will get you used to thinking about some ideas that you may want to pursue. I always get asked by students, what style of photography did their photos fall under? And the truth is not so straightforward. Think of photography a little bit like music, okay? Music can make you feel many emotions emotions all at once, and music often crosses many genres at one time as well. It can also be very creative, or it can also be very, very technical. And this is the same for photography. We want to be able to understand all aspects of it. So let's have a look at some styles to start with. So, every minute of the day, we are exposed to photography and visual imagery in some shape or form, whether it's an advertising campaign in your local department store or just looking at pictures of your friends or family on a social networking site. And this lesson explores some of these photographic styles that you see appearing on your screen and how they are used to communicate something to the viewer, whether it's a message, whether it's a story, to sell a product, or just show how beautiful a certain place you visited is. Photography is a form of communication, and the way that we shoot and what we photograph determines what our photography communicates. And understanding these different styles will help you to identify subjects that you like to shoot and to begin to enhance your own style as well. So chances are you've probably seen, a style pop up there on your screen already that you wanted to try out, or perhaps a style that you are already photographing. Okay, there's a huge range of styles, and we couldn't cover every single one of them in this lesson this evening, but we are going to focus on these key areas. It'll also help you to develop your knowledge for your area that you are interested in, because you might begin to research some of the photographers in this area and the work that they do. Looking at other photographers is a great way of developing your visual skills and give you inspiration and motivation to go out and make pictures yourself. So let's have a look. And arguably the most popular style of photography, and probably the one that we more than likely begin to get into when we first pick up the camera, is landscape photography. Landscape photography, as I said, is arguably the most popular subject for photographers to shoot, and usually the photographer is trying to represent a particular place, a particular space, or to illustrate the beauty of a natural environment. Landscape photography has a very, very broad definition though, and it doesn't always have to be large open landscapes like this incredible Ansel Adams photograph. I'm sure you may have heard of Ansel Adams before. He's probably the most famous photographer of at least of the 20th century. You can certainly check out his work. Photographed the American landscape in these stunning, stunning black and white photographs. But landscape photography doesn't always have to be positive photography like this. It can also be spaces that are, where humans have impacted on an environment, a negative impact that humans may have had on a space. Okay, so it doesn't always have to be a positive thing. We could just be showing, man's impact on the landscape, on nature. It can be urban areas as well. It doesn't have to be, out there in the country or in the wild. We can be photographing our own local areas as well. This would be considered landscape photography too. Like most styles of photography, you can shoot landscape for both commercial and purely creative purposes. And I think landscape is a great one to begin with because it allows you time to get used to your camera, how your camera works. You can be on your own and you can practice a lot without being interrupted. And even if ultimately landscape is not the type of photography that you want to do, I think it's a really, really good place to begin. How many of you are photographing landscapes at the moment? Excellent. I can see lots of people saying yes. I see people saying sometimes. Yeah, so I mean, it may not be your primary focus with your photography, but as I said, it's a great way to practice. And when we look at our cameras a little bit more in depth, it might be something that you'll come back to at a later stage. Very closely related to our landscape photography is aerial photography. And this is an area of photography that is becoming more and more popular. Aerial photography is exactly as it sounds. It captures images from above, usually quite high from a helicopter or an airplane. But can anybody tell me what we would use nowadays for doing aerial photography? There's a particular tool. Exactly, I can see Sujetin has just said it there. Mark, Daniel, excellent. Of course, drones. Drones have opened up aerial photography in a massive way, far more than photographers would have been able to do in the past. In the past, you would have had to try and get access to a helicopter. And it was a very specialist type of photography, but now drones have opened up this world a lot to us. And even though drones are still quite expensive, they're a lot cheaper than trying to get access to a helicopter as well. So coming back down onto the ground, in architectural photography, again, quite closely related to landscape photography, but the main subject here is buildings and structures that are visually interesting. And these can be entire shots of buildings, or in this case, it can be something a little bit more abstract, just some kind of interesting element or shape, or just simply an appreciation of a building and its design. Architectural photography can also include interiors. It doesn't just have to be exteriors. So, you might like to photograph theatres, you might even like to photograph something like football stadiums and so on. This would all be considered architectural photography. Photographers may shoot architectural photography for commercial reasons as well, the kind of thing that we would see in design magazines and even fashion magazines, home interior magazines and so on. Or perhaps even just for historical reasons or just creative reasons. You might just, appreciate architecture and just want to capture it as best as you can. So, I mean, an image like this illustrates the kind of complex engineering, and the urban environment and the shapes that we have going on in this as well. It works very, very well, in particular in black and white too. Henko, you're asking about, will we talk about lenses? We will be in lesson 2. Henko will speak all about lenses as well. Now, so after dark, this is, I have to say, one of my favorite types of photography. But after dark, sorry, I've got on ahead there on one of the slides. Sorry about that. There we go. So back to the nighttime photograph here. This is a really, really great way of experiencing the environment and in the world in a completely different way than we are used to in our day-to-day. Can anybody tell me what type of exposure was used in this particular shot? Okay, so yeah, exactly, Maria, exactly, Clyde. Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. I can see Sean saying it then. Ashley, you're saying you're not sure. Well, that's absolutely fine, Ashley. That's exactly why we are here, because we are going to learn how to make these types of photographs. But this is what we would call a long exposure. So in other words, we had our camera shutter open for a long time to create this. It's simply to let in enough light, but we can see that this is a long exposure because we have our trails, our light trails passing through this photograph. So we can see we have the red lights here of the cars moving away from the camera. We have cars moving towards the camera as well, because we can see their bright headlights. And this is something we're going to have a look at in lesson 4, how to create as well. So we are going to do this in lesson 4 when we control our shutter speeds, and that is what we are here to learn. So a long exposure is when we have a very long shutter speed. And don't worry if you don't understand that at this stage. It is something we are going to be diving in a little bit more at a later stage. Now, the other arguably largest part of photography, and one that I think many of us love to do, including myself, is portraiture. Okay, so portraiture, our people are without a doubt, the biggest subject in photography apart from landscapes, or even perhaps even more so. People have always been the most interesting and intriguing subject for photographers and create the most interesting images for the viewer. We have a natural curiosity and interest in other people, and portrait photography is a means of capturing this. In very broad terms, it refers to photographing a person or perhaps a group of people to capture their expression, their personality and their mood. And I can see Lucky, you're saying this is your speciality. Josh, it is Angelina Jolie as well in that particular photograph. Typically, but not always, the face is usually the main focus of the image. You can have, close-ups like this that we have here, but you can also have 3/4 length portraits like the image of the lady here against the fence. Okay, you could also have full body portraits and environmental portraits. Now, what I mean by environmental portraits is photographing somebody perhaps where they work. So, for example, you might photograph a carpenter in his studio, and this would be considered a environmental portrait. Okay, you always tend to strive to reveal the person and their personality and their character from the photograph. And this can be a good personality, or it could be a strong personality, or it could be a weak personality, or a funny or a serious personality. You want to say something about the person in the photograph. And portraits can be shot against simple backgrounds where the subject's face or body, uh, you know, um, try to tell a story of that person. They could be shot in a particular environment that reveals a lot more about who they are and what they do. Okay, and portrait photography, it goes over into other areas as well, like candid photography. And candid photography isn't so much a genre or a category of photography, but it is worth mentioning as a style. And candid photography is usually used for capturing little moments and little things as they happen, spontaneous events that just happen. So the subject usually isn't aware of the photographer, and the shots result in being very, very natural. You can get these kind of wonderful little moments as well. This style is excellent for capturing people at their most relaxed, and candid is really great style for family photography as well. And if you are the photographer in your family, it's very important, as your photographs are the ones that future generations will look back on. So if you are the family photographer, I'd recommend to try and have the camera on you as often as possible. And the more you have it, the more people will become relaxed around you, and this results in great photographs. It also gives you more of a chance of capturing all those little moments as they happen. But we could use candid photography in, I suppose, a more professional sense as well. And weddings are also great subjects for candid photography. And the reason for this is that usually people getting married are not natural models. Oh, sorry, and they may not feel comfortable on front of the camera. And this shot just shows how a candid style can capture these little intimate moments that you probably wouldn't get, if you're trying to pose these people, or if the camera is right in the face of the person. Now, I know it might look like he is blowing his nose, but really what the photographer has captured here is the emotion, in this father's face, seeing his daughter as a bride for the first time. And just this is simply not something that you could set up. It's something that you can only capture happening naturally. Okay, so I can see Sajida, you're saying you've done a couple of wedding photography and you love it. Yeah, it's a tough area, but you can get some really, really terrific shots. Now, fashion photography would also be quite closely related to our portrait photography as well, in the sense that the majority of fashion photography is about photographing people. And we see fashion photography as probably one of the styles that we are most exposed to, as we see it everywhere we go. We see it in books, we see it in magazines, we see it on websites, we see it in billboards, and so on. If we were to talk about the purpose or the function of fashion photography, we would say that it is the use of photographs to sell a product, to sell a lifestyle. And this can be anything from clothes, from fragrances, to footwear, to accessories, even sunglasses, and so on. And while the main objective is to entice the viewer to purchase a product, these images are great because they're usually very creative and very visually interesting. And of course, it's this visual interest that draws in the viewer and attracts them to the product, makes them want to know a little bit more about this product. Now, in a photograph like this is photographed by a very famous photographer named Annie Leibovitz. There's a lot of different elements going on here, so these photographs, these people would have been photographed, and then there is, as I can see some people mentioning, there is a little bit of Photoshop involved here as well, in terms of adding the birds afterwards and so on. But initially, the people, the environment, these are all photographed, and then a little bit of work happens afterwards as well. And that is a big part of fashion photography, is the post editing stage, where the photograph gets taken to another level through the use of software like Photoshop or like Lightroom and so on. But probably one of my favorite things about fashion photography that it lends itself to so many environments and locations. You can use anything from a studio to an urban setting, to a rundown building, and you can be very, very creative with, with these locations. Now, this is an extreme example where there's a lot of image manipulation happening afterwards, but we could keep our fashion photography very, very simple as well. If you don't like this style, you could go with something, just a plain white black back or a plain white background or a plain black background and so on, and you can still make wonderful photography. So it's a very, very broad and creative area. And on this topic as well of kind of, I suppose, image manipulation with photography, has anybody heard this term before, conceptual photography? Well, let me ask you a question, guys. What is a concept? What's another word for concept? Exactly, Brian. Yes, exactly, Craig as well, and Roy, and yeah, Sean as well. Another word for a concept is an idea. Exactly, Josh, an idea. So, all through the history of photography, there has always been arguments to whether photography qualifies as art or not. And however, this argument has pretty much been dissolved over the last 40 years, and technically all photography is an art form because it's a creative and visual process. But this particular category usually refers to images or collection of images where the photographer is trying to convey an idea, a particular idea or a concept. Okay, so really good photographic work will always provoke an emotion in the viewer, and that emotion can be joy, it can be sadness, it could be even fear. So looking at these photographs here by Robert and Shauna Park Harrison, the concept or the idea here is that they wanted to make photographs about the environment, but they wanted to do it in a bit of a different way. And here they have this message of this man. He's the last man on earth, and he's trying to harness the environment, the power of the environment to power his inventions. And this can say a lot about our modern environment, and thinking about how we treat the environment every day, and so on. And these are what we call constructed photographs. So there's elements that are photographed separately, and then they would be brought together again using something like Photoshop. Now, we don't, again, conceptual photography doesn't necessarily have to include the use of a software like Photoshop and so on. But when you create photographs, you don't always have to capture reality. Just like a book or a movie, you have the freedom to create your own stories and create totally fictional images that tell a story, just like this here as well. Now, fine art and conceptual photography, again, the genres can cross over here as well. Just like some of my favorite images here from a Japanese photographer named Hiroshi Sugimoto. And what we have going on here is a concept where Hiroshi Sugimoto has photographed entire movies. So what's happened here is, because these movies are very long, he's used very, very long exposures here for the entire duration of a film, and what he was left with are these photographs where the screen is entirely white. But these exposures were up to 2 hours long in some instances. Now, this work is about time. It's about the passing of time and how much we take in, when we're watching something like a movie, or just our day-to-day lives. But then in this we also have something else going on as well. This is also about these cinemas, which are almost like cathedrals. These lavish cinemas are very rare nowadays. So this work also crosses into our next genre of photography, which we would call documentary. So in another way, Sugimoto ended up documenting these old cinemas, these incredible cinemas, and even the drive-in cinema there as well. Something that we tend not to experience so much anymore. And as I said, this crosses over into another area of photography called documentary photography. And here we've got a collection of images by a photographer named Corey Arnold. And what we have here is a photographic story. So, if any of you are familiar with Deadliest Catch on the Discovery Channel, it's a show that's been running a very long time now at this stage on Discovery Channel for probably over a decade now. Corey Arnold photographed these Alaskan fishermen, these Alaskan crab fishermen, and he's created a story here through a number of photographs. And this will give you a sense of how a story is told to through documentary photography. For example, the shot of the boat here is what we would call an establishing photograph. It gives us an idea of the location. It tells us what we're going to be looking at, or gives us some idea of what we're going to be looking at in the next images. And you can see here then we have the extreme conditions that these fishermen are working in, the massive waves. But then we've also got a sense of character of these fishermen as well. Their joy of the catch, when they catch all the crab. And if you've ever seen that show, Deadliest Catch, you'll know they can make a lot of money as well. So very, very dangerous conditions that they're working in. But ultimately, if they're successful, the payoff is very, very big. And photo stories don't need to be particularly newsworthy subjects. You could simply make a photograph or a photo story on, some person or some group that are interesting to you, like a local artist, like a boxing club, a dancing group, or even about your own life. And think about this. Think about other passions that you have. Like, for example, you might like hiking, you might like cooking, and so on. And you could bring your photography into that world as well and give people a unique perspective. People who may not be necessarily into cooking or into hiking and so on. So, have some ideas about how you might make a little documentary for yourself. Does this get anybody thinking about new areas of photography that they may not have thought about before? Excellent, and I see lots and lots and lots of yeses coming in there. Fantastic, and that's I hope it does get you thinking a lot about things that you might go and decide to explore after this, and throughout this course as well. Closely related to that type of photography, documentary photography, we've also got photojournalism, which also kind of, I suppose, crosses over a little bit into war photography as well. Type of photography we're very familiar with on a day-to-day basis. The type of photographs we'd see in the newspapers or on news websites and so on. Photographers who shoot in this style can typically put their life in danger to document these types of events, but photographers are usually protected by international conventions, around armed warfare. However, they can also just be caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. For example, Robert Capa, a very famous World War II photographer who was unfortunately himself, he died while on assignment. But this is one of his most famous photographs, a photograph from the D-Day landings, and that particular roll of film was actually destroyed. This is one of the few surviving photographs. But if you've ever seen that film Saving Private Ryan, it might remind you a little bit of that as well. That scene, at the start of that movie, and in fact, this photograph was actually a big inspiration for that too. And photojournalism is similar to documentary photography in that you are usually highlighting a particular subject or a particular issue. However, the difference is with photojournalism that you are photographing a subject that's a current event, and you're shooting it as it happens and informing the world about it as it is going on. And I mean, if you think about our 24-hour news channels, if you think about the fact that mobile phones now play a huge part as well in how quickly photographs are shared nowadays, it's almost like a new type of photojournalism too, and they certainly play their part in modern photojournalism. But move away from that into something a little bit different, and I saw people mention this type of photography a little bit earlier as well. Sports photography is a very fast-paced and exciting form of photography, and with sports photography you can be up very close to the action, capturing shots as they happen. The main thing with sports photography is that you need to be very fast, but you'll often see with sports photographers they tend to carry a lot of very heavy equipment, and I'm sure we've all seen it, if you watch rugby, if you watch football or soccer or American football or whatever sports you like to enjoy, but you see the photographers at the side of the pitch or the side of the arena, and they have those huge lenses to get closer to the action. Okay, so that's the idea. That's what sports photographers tend to have to use, these telephoto lenses, and we'll be speaking about those in the next lesson as well. And those types of lenses would also be used for this type of photography too, wildlife photography, which is concerned with documenting various forms of wildlife in their natural habitat. And how many of you would like to do this type of photography, wildlife photography? Lots of yeses coming in, and we typically get quite a lot of South African students as well on these lessons. And we're always jealous of you guys because you're close to Kruger Park and so on. And I see quite often, I see lots of wildlife photographs coming from our South African students, and we're always a little bit jealous of it. But our wildlife photography, it can be local wildlife as well, like trying to capture badgers or birds or foxes in your local area or wherever you were from. Have a look at the wildlife in your own area. And Delisha joining us from Jamaica, you're saying not much wildlife in Jamaica. Well, I'd imagine you might have some exotic birds and so on, so it's worth having a look at what is in your local area. You might explore it as well. But you can get very creative with it, like in this photograph here from Andre Bonfrey, who actually won an award last year with this photograph of this. I think they're the macaque monkeys, all huddled up together. But you've got that heart shape happening in the photograph there as well. So a very keen eye, really, really wonderful shot there. And just two more genres to have a look at before we move on to our cameras. Macro and close-up photography is an area that I find that students really, really, really love, and it can be an area that you can have a huge amount of fun in as well. Close-up photography refers to getting real close up to a small subject and filling the entire frame or picture with the subject. And this can be purely because the subject is a very interesting shape. The texture, there's something that's caught your eye, or there's some detail that you want to emphasize. A macro is a very similar concept really as well. However, I would consider macro getting in even closer, maybe to the point where the subject's not even recognizable anymore, and all you can see is a shape or a pattern, or so just something visually, interesting or colorful. And we can tell quite quickly from looking at this photograph that it is a macro size photograph, because you imagine the size of these pistachio nuts in real life, and the photographer here, David Gilliver, has gotten a little bit fun here as well by adding these guys to this photograph and just interacting in this way, in a fun and a creative way as well. Okay, macro photography usually requires specialized lenses, however, and some cameras will have a macro function on them as well, but we'll discuss this a lot more in detail in lesson 2. And then finally, food photography. And food photography, like fashion photography, is usually commercially based, meaning that it's similar to fashion in that its purpose is to sell or promote a product, which in this case is some lovely cakes. Okay, so the images here are typically something that we'd see in like a restaurant or a recipe book and so on. But like fashion photography, food photography can be extremely creative, and it's often very over the top in order to draw the viewer in. If you're based in the UK or Ireland, you're probably familiar with those Marks and Spencer's ads that they do around Christmas time that are always really extravagant and really, really lavish and so on. And you can actually learn a lot about food photography from looking at those ads, at those advertisements. And also just think about this: if you're really into cooking or baking, this style of photography is a great way of bringing your two passions together. You might have a cooking blog, and you could use this your food photography to promote your recipes and so on. But the key to all this photography, to all good photography, is to be creative. Okay, so thinking about how your colours work in your photographs and so on. How you might move the camera around the subject. And this is all what we're going to be building up throughout this course. So what style would you like to master? So you can type in what style it is that you would like to master. There's probably lots of different styles that you would like to master. can see Daniel, you're there, or Damien, you're saying you're very, very hungry. Well, we've not got too long on the lesson left, Damien. So if you could hang on just about 15 minutes or so, you can grab yourself a little bit of dinner. Excellent. So I could see the wildlife, night photography, portrait, candid and portrait, all styles, sports photography, fashion. Brilliant. So lots and lots of different styles coming in there, and I do recommend that you try to, practice everything. Try everything. As photographers, you'd be surprised at what's thrown at you on a day-to-day basis. You could be photographing something very glamorous one day, and you could be photographing something a little bit more mundane, a little bit more ordinary the next day as well. We do need to be prepared for every scenario as photographers. So now that we've had a look at some different styles, it's time to gain the skills to master your particular style. We'll have a look at some different camera types as well. So I'm sure lots of you have questions about your cameras and so on. We'll be breaking them down as we go on throughout this course. But let's just have a basic introduction to different camera types that are available to us. Now, it's important to understand the capabilities of the equipment that we have. Now, does everybody know what type of camera they are using? Now, not necessarily the manufacturer or the model, but what type of camera are you using? So I can see people saying DSLRs, lots of DSLRs coming in there. That's great to see, fantastic. I can see lots of people saying, some people saying they're using their phones, that's perfect. Lots of people, some people saying they're using mirrorless cameras as well. Excellent. So we have lots and lots of varied cameras, bridge cameras, compact camera there as well. Fantastic. And these are all cameras that we are going to have a look at. And in this section, we'll take a look at some of the most common types of cameras on the market and the differences between them. Now, as there's so many brands and models on the market, I will be discussing these in general terms and not brand specific, but the cameras that we will be looking at will be pretty standard, and you should see your own one mentioned as well. Before we do that, I do want to just have a quick look at the different types of cameras, some of the components that I'm going to be mentioning, so just so we begin to get some familiar with some of the terminology around our cameras. Now, at this point as well, I would also say that if I mention something that you're not familiar with, having a look at your camera's manual is very, very useful as well. So when I introduce a new term, if you reference your camera's manual, you'll be able to see if your camera has that function or not. Okay, so it's a good idea to keep that close. So now, don't worry if this is not the type of camera that you are using. Generally, all cameras will have very, very similar components, okay? But the first thing that we need to be aware of is our camera's viewfinder. Okay, so the viewfinder is very straightforward. This is where we look through the camera to compose our photographs. And in this particular case, you look through the camera and you actually see through the lens. I'll discuss this in more detail in a few minutes. But for the moment, the key term here now is viewfinder. And this term is going to come up over and over again, so it is important to know. The other component then is our LCD screen. So if your camera doesn't have a viewfinder, it definitely should have an LCD screen. Okay, or a liquid crystal display. So simply put, this is the screen that we can see our photographs on, and we can use this to compose our photographs and play back our photographs as well. Okay, so our viewfinder and our LCD screens. Now, breaking down the camera a little bit more, if we have a look at a top view of it, we have our shutter button. Okay, so this one is probably one I'm sure everybody is familiar with, and it's the button that takes the photograph. Now, again, it's just a terminology that I really want to make sure that you have. But this can also be referred to sometimes as our shutter release button or our exposure button as well. And pretty much on all cameras, when you press this button halfway down, the camera's lens begins to focus the shot for you. When you fully press it, it actually takes the photograph. But we'll be discussing focusing a lot more in a future lesson as well. Some cameras, we may have an LCD screen on the top of the camera camera as well. This is very useful for quickly referencing some of the settings that we may be shooting at instead of having to constantly go back or have a look at the back of the LCD. So this is very, very useful. Also, if you have the camera on a tripod and so on, it's a way of quickly referencing the settings that you have on your camera. We've also got our hot shoe, so some cameras may have a hot shoe connection, which allows us to attach an external flash, so we can use an external flash on certain types of cameras as well. We can also, if you're into doing video and so on, you can actually use this for attaching microphones as well. But typically for our photography, we'd be using this for attaching an external flash to the top. And then so hopefully we're a little bit more familiar now with these main components on our cameras, and we'll discuss these a little bit more as we go on throughout our future lessons. But these are the main types of cameras that we're going to be having a look at. So you probably see your own camera here already, or at least your style of camera here already. So, sorry about that, guys. So the first one we're going to have a look at here is our point and shoot camera. Chloe, you're asking, are phones okay? Absolutely, Chloe. And we're going to be speaking about those a little bit later on, Chloe, as well. They definitely play a big part in our photography nowadays. Okay, so they really have changed, photography for us on a day-to-day basis. And I mean, if we talk about our cameras, the first one we're going to have a look at are our point and shoot cameras. Now, how many of you are using one of these at the moment? I see Becky, you're saying sometimes. Jessica, you have one there. Mark, you're saying you used to. Okay, so I used one previously as well. Gurpreet, you're saying there as well. Every time I do this lesson, I have to say I get more and more no's coming in on this one when it comes to point and shoots, sadly. Now, point and shoot cameras are great, but they have very much been overtaken by phones, and it was only today that I was looking at an article on, I think it was on Petapixel, if you're familiar with that site, petapixel.com or petapixel.com, and they had a comparison of point and shoot sales against our mobile sales, and the difference is really, really alarming. But point and shoot cameras, they are still wonderful little cameras, and a lot of photographers do carry them around as secondary cameras as well. But as the name states, you simply point and shoot with a camera like this. You need very little knowledge, to know how to operate these cameras. However, they still have a lot of functionality that will give you creative control. We can also get very advanced point and shoot cameras nowadays as well. If you're familiar with the Sony X series, they are very, very advanced compact cameras. Give us fully manual control and have very large sensors as well. But we can also get much more basic ones like the ones that we have here on screen that are very much as point and shoot cameras, and these are for everyday events. These are great for simply snapping and documenting events, places, parties, birthday parties, just everyday photography. In general, they have decent zooms on them. They'll have a video function on them as well, and they'll have a pop-up or a built-in flash on them too. Okay, but in general, they are a little bit more limited than some of the other cameras that we will be having a look at, like our DSLRs. Now, I know I asked this earlier, but how many of you are using a DSLR at the moment? Matthew's using one. I can see Chloe there again, yeah, and fantastic. I can see Jason as well. Loads and loads and loads and loads of people. David, Paul, yeah, excellent. I could say the majority of us here are probably using DSLRs. Now, these are without a doubt the most popular type of cameras among professionals and photography enthusiasts, and they are very high quality and have incredible functionality. And these cameras have a fully manual mode that allows you to bypass all the automatic functions and take full control of the camera. And as your education in photography progresses, this extended functionality will become much more important to you, and at some point, if you don't have one of these already, you may consider purchasing one of these in the future as well. Our DSLR cameras have this ability to be able to change lenses on them as well. So we can take off the lens, we can attach a different type of lens if we need to. And this function allows for much broader creative control. It expands the type of photographs that we can take. And these interchangeable lenses also allow us to upgrade to better quality lenses as our photography progresses without having to change the whole camera. So it also allows you to build up a range of lenses as well, so that you can select the right one for different situations. We can also add accessories such as hot shoe flashes. We can attach them to studio flashes. We can use remote shutter releases and so on. And these are all things that we'll be talking about as we continue on. Catherine, you're asking what sort of price range? Well, depends on what country you are in, but we're based here in Dublin in Ireland, so I am going to use euro. And I mean, you're starting from about €300 upwards, so you get a decent one for about €300, Catherine. You are from Ireland, well there you go. So what I'd recommend, Catherine, is I did put together a gear guide as well. In your student login area, that will be available there for you, Catherine. And that I designed that to help students give you an idea of all of these kind of questions based around purchasing equipment and so on. So do have a look at that as well. Now, so many of you may be wondering where the term DSLR comes from, or what does DSLR stand for? Well, DSLR stands for Digital Single Lens Reflex. Digital Single Lens Reflex, okay? So let's break this down in terms of what each of these words means. Well, basically the D in DSLR simply means digital. Okay, so it's how our photographs are captured on this camera. We would have used SLR cameras in the past. We simply would have called them SLR cameras, which was just simply single lens reflex. But now, because majority of us are shooting digitally, we call them digital single lens reflex. Okay. So the key concept here of a DSLR or an SLR camera is that when we are composing our photograph, we look through the camera's viewfinder. Okay, so we look through the camera's viewfinder, and this means we're looking directly through the lens. Okay, so we're seeing what the lens sees. And how this works is that light enters in our camera, it hits a mirror in our camera, and it bounces up all around this object called the pentaprism. And it comes out the pentaprism to the viewfinder, and we see the photograph, or we see the scene the way it should be, the right way up. Okay, so light enters through the lens, it hits the mirror, it bounces all around this unusual looking object called the pentaprism, and it comes out the viewfinder. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, and that's it. That's how we can see through our digital single lens reflex. So that is our digital, and that's the single lens part. So the single lens is the light entering the lens, hitting the mirror, going up around the pentaprism and out the viewfinder. Does everybody understand that part of it so far? Harold, like a periscope. Exactly, yeah, very, very similar idea. Perfect. So what about the reflex part? So where does the reflex part come into action? Well, the reflex part refers to something a bit different. This refers to the way that the mirror actually flips up when we take our photograph, okay? So when we look through the camera, the mirror inside the body is in the down position, like in the illustration we saw in the previous slide. So in the down position, the mirror is redirecting the light up to the pentaprism, and we can see the photograph, or we can see the scene. Now, what happens when we take our photograph? What happens to our DSLR when we take a shot? Particularly when we look through the viewfinder. For a split second, what do we see? Just waiting on some responses there. Exactly, yep, there we go. It goes dark. Okay, so we see nothing. It goes black, it goes dark. We don't see anything at all. And the reason for this is that the mirror has now moved out of the way to allow the light to enter through the lens and hit our camera's imaging sensor to make the photograph. So this is what's happening. This is the reflex action of our camera. We press the shutter button, the mirror moves up out of the way, it comes through and it hits the camera's sensor. So that is where digital single lens reflex comes from. Okay, so if you weren't sure of what it meant before, or perhaps you did know what it meant, but you just didn't know what exactly where the terminology came from, now you know. Okay, so that is how it all works in our digital single lens reflex, and we'll be breaking that down much more in detail as we go on. Now you will also be able to reference these slides as well in your toolkits afterwards. So if you wanted a little bit more of a detailed breakdown, you can check out that slide in your toolkit. That'll be available for you afterwards as well. Now, just to give you another a view of this, when we take off our camera's lens, we can see the mirror inside the camera. I'm sure you've all seen this if you've ever changed the lens on your camera. But if we have a look, this is the mirror in the upright position, and we can clearly see the camera's digital imaging sensor here as well that will create our photograph. Now, I'm just aware of the time. Okay, so we are coming up to the hour mark. Now we just have a couple of more slides to have a look at before we finish up this evening. So because of the housekeeping at the start, it kind of just delayed us a little bit. So do try to hang on if possible. We've just got about another 5 minutes or so, and then we'll have our Q&A a little bit later on as well. Now, moving on. I saw somebody mention these earlier on as well, are bridge cameras. And bridge cameras are a slightly different design from our DSLR cameras. The main difference being with our bridge cameras that we cannot change our lenses on our bridge cameras. They're also sometimes referred to as hybrid cameras as well. The idea with these types of cameras is that they were designed to fill the gap between a DSLR and the compact camera range. So in between, this is where the name bridge comes from, to bridge the gap between those two types of cameras. These are a great stepping stone. If you don't want to go and invest in a DSLR, these offer a huge amount of functionality. We would still have our fully manual functionality. And generally, we also have very good zoom ranges on these as well. Where they would fall down a little bit compared to our DSLRs is the image quality would not be as good because they use a smaller camera sensor. And also, they're a little bit limited in terms of the range of shutter speeds and f-stops that you might have on them as well. And don't worry if you're not familiar with these terms, we'll be looking at these terms as we continue on throughout the course. But these are a great way into photography, and they're very convenient cameras, particularly for people who want to get into wildlife because they generally have these incredible zoom ranges available to them. Now, mirrorless cameras as well, and I saw a few people mentioning these earlier. How many of you are using a mirrorless camera at the moment? Good, I see lots of yeses coming in there. Happy to see that. Brilliant. I'm a big fan of mirrorless cameras, I have to say. These are very useful and convenient cameras for what I find for day-to-day photography. If you're after a camera that's still going to give you fully manual function, but is also going to combine lots of great technology, like the kind of technology you'd see on your phones and so on, and the ability to be able to change lenses, and the fact that you can use something that's much smaller as well, mirrorless cameras are a really great option. Okay, so they'll give you all the functionality you'll find in a DSLR. You'll also have the ability to change lenses as well. Now, where they lack a little bit is in terms of quality, compared to our DSLRs. But that said, they really are catching up as well. Okay, the main reason these cameras are called mirrorless cameras is that they lack the mirror mechanism that we saw inside our DSLR a little bit earlier on. Okay, so for this reason, because that part of the camera is removed, it actually means that these cameras are a lot smaller, a lot more compact as well. And these are really growing in popularity, and I think these are very useful for things like just everyday photography. If you like street photography, if you like traveling and so on, and you don't want to be carrying around some cumbersome equipment, certainly one to consider. Okay, so how these guys work, they're a little bit different in terms of, our DSLR because as we saw, they don't have the mirror. So the same with our bridge cameras, our mirrorless cameras, they lack the mirror. Okay, and because of that, what happens very, very simply, the light still enters through the lens, but basically it will reach our imaging sensor, and what we're seeing is simply a digital preview in our camera's LCD. So this is like a little LCD viewfinder that we're looking through instead, like a little miniature screen that we would see in the viewfinder instead. Some mirrorless cameras, some bridge cameras lack the viewfinder altogether and would simply have an LCD screen on the back instead. And sometimes you'll see these referred to as electronic viewfinders or EVFs. So if you've ever seen that before, you can buy an EVF attachment for your camera. What it's referring to is an electronic viewfinder. Now, for something at the extreme end of the professional scale as well, are medium format cameras. Medium format cameras are something a little bit different as they are usually only used by very high end professionals due to their extremely high cost. Medium format cameras are called medium format because they have a large imaging sensor, much larger imaging sensor than the other cameras mentioned, and for this reason they have incredible quality, but also for this reason they have an incredible price tag, and you're going to be looking at from anywhere from about €8,000 all the way up to about 25,000 euro for a camera like this. Now, that said, the market is slowly beginning to change here, and for example, the Fuji G1X that I have displayed there on the screen is an attempt at a more affordable digital mirror medium format camera, but I still think you're talking about €6,500, and that's without the lens, so still very, very expensive. But just if you're ever wondering, if you ever see photographers and they're using a very unusual looking camera like this, these are typically used for very high quality fashion and advertising photography. So if you ever see those massive billboards, advertising watches or cars and so on, these are typically the types of cameras that are used to capture those types of photographs. And then finally, as well, as we mentioned, I think it was Chloe was talking about these earlier, are smartphones. Smartphones have a big place in photography in the modern area, and I mean really over the last 10 years they've had a massive impact on the history of photography as well. As I mentioned earlier, smartphones have in particular have this incredible ability of being able to share photographs instantly, absolutely instantly. Okay, to the point where we see on our news reports and so on amateur footage coming out from events that are happening, that are taking place in real time, all because they've been captured on a phone. If you think about our social media, sharing our photographs straight away, if you think about Instagram, if you think about Snapchat and so on, all these platforms that we have to be able to share our photographs to a huge audience straight away, that impact cannot be understated at all. And phones have come a long, long way in quality as well. You think about the iPhone 7, you think about Google's Pixel camera. These cameras have higher quality sensors now, and they're really, trying to improve their cameras every single day on these phones too. So they have a lot of them are capturing in RAW now as well. So they're coming every time, as I said, every time I do this lesson, again, they just keep coming further and further and further and further. How many of you are using a phone at the moment for your photography? I would imagine universally that this is going to be yes. Sometimes, okay, yeah. Well, that's a good answer there, Jessica. Sometimes. So sometimes the best camera that we have is the one that we have on us. Okay, and it's not always going to be possible to have our DSLRs or mirrorless cameras, or if you're lucky enough to have a medium format camera and so on. And simply the best one that we can have is the one that we have on us. And for the majority of us, we are going to have our phones on us all the time. So any camera can take a great photograph. You just have to know how to use it. In other words, all cameras are capable of taking a great photograph, and this is what we are going to be looking at as we continue on throughout this course. So great stuff, everybody. My apologies that we ran a little bit over time, but let's just summarize what we had a look at this evening. So we had a look at different styles of photography, and I hope this whetted your appetite for the course, and I hope it also gave you a little bit of inspiration and some ideas about what you might like to try out yourselves with your photography. We also had a look at some different camera types as well, and hopefully you saw your type of camera mentioned here too, and we will be having a look at how to get the most out of all of these types of cameras as well, no matter what level you are at, whether you're a total beginner or whether you're somebody who is a little bit more experienced. So congratulations, you have just laid the foundations. So do attend live when you can to attend. Attend live is great because you can interact with me. I can see all your questions coming in. We've got the support here to help you out as well. We're here to help. You can contact us at any stage. So photography@shawacademy.com, photography@shawacademy.com. You can contact us there. My apologies, I've left an A out, a little bit of a typo there in the academy. So I'm sure you can all add that extra A in. So shawacademy.com. My apologies about that little bit of a typo there as well. Our next lesson is lesson 2, where we're going to be having a look at demystifying camera functions and lens types. So we're going to be digging in more into the camera, and we're going to start exploring your lenses as well. So learning all about the camera's functions. We're going to gain an understanding of our various lens types as well. We're also going to explore how we see versus how our camera sees, and this is a very important distinction to make as well. So do attend live, and remember, we will announce our 12-month membership during lesson 4 as well. Now, just a couple of things to finish up with before we get on to our Q&A, just to make you aware of the final assignment. I know we're only in the very first lesson, but we get loads of questions about this. So there is a final assignment at the very end of the 10 lessons that will be 100 questions long, okay? So it's going to be $39.95 to take that final assignment, but if you are a Premium Plus member, it is absolutely free. Or if you decide to become a Premium Plus member before then, it will be free for you then as well. Okay, you also, the toolkits, as I said, you're going to get access to the toolkits from lessons 1 to, it'll actually be lessons 1 to 4 for you guys, okay, on this. So lessons 1 to 4, you'll get the toolkits for that, and again, if you're on the Premium Plus, you'll have access to all those toolkits as well. To let you know about your members area, when you go to shawacademy.com, you can log in there, you can get the recordings of the lessons. They're posted 24 hours after this live lesson. You'll also find your weekly assignments there as well. So at the end of every week, there is also a weekly assignment. This is just for practice, so you can put into practice what we cover throughout these weeks, and you'll find those at the end of the week every Friday. Now, as well, you can interact with us on Facebook, on Snapchat, and on Twitter as well. So you can find us on facebook.com/Shaw Academy. Follow us on Twitter at Shaw Academy, or if you're on Snapchat, you can go shaw.academy as well. And I do have a little bit of a challenge for you as well for this week. So your challenge for this week is I'd like you to send or share a photograph with us on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Shaw Academy. Send over a photograph of a style that you would like to master, or a style that you are currently developing. So facebook.com/Shaw Academy. You like the page and you'll be able to post up some photographs there, and simply send us a photograph of a style that you would like to master. Now, so thank you very, very much, and we can do a short Q&A now as well. So if you have any questions at all, I can try to grab those for you then as well. A couple of people asking when is the next lesson. You'll receive reminders for your next lesson. So it's in 2 days' time, so you'll be able to you get your reminders for that then as well. Paul, do you necessarily have to master one style, or do you do more? Paul, a photographer should be prepared to for any situation. Okay, so what we're going to teach you throughout this course, Paul, is, as you'll see going on, is that I'm going to teach you how to cope with every single lighting scenario or situation that you may find yourself in. Now, you might find that there's a particular type of photography you enjoy more than another type of photography, Paul. So, for example, you might like doing portraits, but that doesn't mean that you can't go out and photograph the odd landscape then as well. Okay? Let's see. Nicole, you're asking what is my professional style that I mastered in? Well, Nicole, I particularly enjoy studio photography myself. I love doing studio photography. It's been a while since I've done a little bit of studio photography, but my most of my training is actually in the kind of fine art conceptual area, Nicole. My education is at least in that area, but my freelance work, I've done everything. I've photographed, hundreds of weddings. Like I said, Nicole, as well. Like, there's sometimes you can be photographing something very glamorous. Like, for example, I remember assisting on a shoot where we were photographing an Irish band called Westlife at the height of their fame about a decade ago. But the photographer I was assisting then that day, when he finished that shoot, he had to travel off to South Africa to photograph trousers for a catalogue. Trousers for a catalogue. So, it's really extremes. Like, you can go from something very glamorous to something very much more mundane. So, it's very, very broad. Brian, do medium format cameras also shoot video? Some might have the ability, Brian, but generally they're not set up for it. Okay, because their imaging sensors are huge. You can imagine trying to capture video on a camera like that. The files would be massive. It would be incredibly difficult for a computer to process that information. When it comes to that level of video, Brian, you're looking at a different type of camera. You're talking about the red cameras and so on, or Canon's Cine range and that, and they're designed for 4K shooting and so on. Fatima, you're using a Nikon D7000. This course will certainly help you to understand that camera and to become a good photographer. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great camera. The Nikon D range, so if you're using a Nikon D series camera, they are incredibly high quality. How does the shutter speed work? Suja, sorry, I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. We'll look at that in lesson 4. So, be sure. SJ, excellent. Well, SJ, we will have a look at that in lesson 4. I won't go into it now because there is an entire lesson on it, but that's what we will be having a look at. Harold, you're asking, what's the best camera for wildlife photography? There's a lot, Harold. Okay, it's a little bit of a complex question. It's a lot to do with your lenses as well. But what I'd recommend there is a cropped sensor camera. There's actually big benefits to cropped sensor cameras when it comes to wildlife photography, Harold. So something like something like the Nikon D7000 range, or the if the Nikon D500 or the Canon 7D Mark II. Those types of cameras are very, very good for wildlife photography. But again, have a look at the gear guide that you'll find in the login area, Harold. I think I'd actually discussed that in those bonus lessons. Let's see. Sean, you're asking about the qualification and the certificate that you get. It's a level 4 certificate, okay, that you'll get from these courses. Aaron, you're asking, any plans to discuss camera care in adverse weather conditions? No, not particularly, Aaron. What I'd simply recommend there is that you get a rain cover for your camera. You can pick these up in your local camera shop or online. Just as like if you think about the rain jackets that we'd wear when it's very wet and outside, that we simply throw over quickly. Something very similar for your camera as well that you can buy. You can also buy more extreme weather sealing for your camera, but sometimes weatherproofing your camera can actually be as expensive as your camera itself as well. Let's see, lots of people asking about equipment. So just to remind you guys, those equipment questions you have a look at the gear guide, because it will answer loads of questions that you have around that as well. So definitely check it out. We also have blogs as well, just to remind you about our, if you have a look at our website, shawacademy.com/blogs, there's loads of information there as well. Lots of things about filters, about different lenses and so on. So do check that out, absolutely free, just on our website, shawacademy.com/blogs. Do have a look at that as well. Christina, what style do I recommend for beginners? Well, there's no one style, but like I said a little bit earlier on in the lesson, Christina, landscape photography is a good one to start with because, as I said, you can take your time with it. You can go out there, you can be on your own if you want to be on your own, and you can practice, so you can take your time with it. You're not under pressure trying to photograph somebody else who might get impatient and so on. Okay, but you might, if you have a friend that's patient as well and understanding, they might enjoy being photographed as well, Christina. Glenda, you're asking what is 4K video? Well, I won't go talking about video too much because that is separate, but 4K video is simply a very high quality resolution video. So we're all familiar with high definition, Glenda, and essentially 4K is 4 times the quality of high definition. Alan, again, the gear guide will have a look at how you can clean your camera, but one of the most essential items I recommend for any photographer for cleaning your camera is a simple lens cloth. A simple lens cloth. Tony, you're asking, will this course eventually touch on areas of photo retouching? Not in this course, Tony. We're purely looking at how to get the best out of our cameras. But we do other courses, Tony. I have a course in Lightroom, which is a photographic editing program, which does cover that. We also have Photoshop courses as well. Henko, you're saying when opening an image it seems to lose quality. How do I fix it? Well, that's a little bit of a vague question, Henko, but we will be having a look at that later on in the course as well. In lesson 10, we'll talk all about resolution and we might be able to identify the problem there. But you can also email us at photography@shawacademy.com and we can check that out for you as well. Excellent. I see lots of people saying thanks for the first lesson. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I do hope you enjoyed it this evening. I certainly enjoyed it as well. Chris, you're asking what's the best category of camera for professional photography? Well, there isn't one in particular, Chris. I mean, if you were to talk in general terms, and we do talk a lot in general terms, Chris, when it comes to photography, because there's no one size fits all, and that is something that you'll hear me say a lot throughout the course. There simply is no one size fits all. But if you were to kind of pinhole it, I guess, full frame cameras, Chris, 35mm sensor frames. Full frame cameras would be mostly what professional photographers would use, but it's very broad. Okay, so there's a lot more to it than that. It's not so straightforward, Chris. Let's see, just one last question before we finish up, okay? So, Jivan, you're asking, is macro mode more about the lens you use or the camera itself? Macro mode on the camera is more about the camera rather than the lens, okay? So, it's kind of... It's a bit of it's a little bit of a technical one, Jivan, but basically the camera adapts the lens ever so slightly to try and get a little bit closer focusing, but we will actually speak about this in the next lesson, Jivan. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for this evening because I kept you way over time. Thank you very, very much for joining me this evening, and thank you for your patience as well in terms of the housekeeping at the start of the lesson. I'll see you all back here for lesson 2, where we'll be having a look at demystifying our camera and our lens types as well. Thank you very, very much for joining me tonight, and I'll talk to you again all very, very soon. Thank you and bye bye.